Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing on with the life of Abraham. But here we're going to take a little bit of a pause because we are going to unpack Sodom and Gomorrah. So, chapter 19 of the book of Genesis, we are going to unpack Sodom and Gomorrah next week. But today we are going to set it up with a conversation between Abraham and the Lord concerning Sodom and Gomorrah at the end of chapter 18. So turn with me to Genesis 18, verse 22. So Genesis 18:22. So the men turned from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. So first off, this is referencing back to the first part of Genesis chapter 18 in verses 1 through 21, where you have these men that come to Abraham and are talking with him about Isaac, the forthcoming child of promise. And I do believe that they are angels. But the craziest thing and the coolest thing at the same time is the fact that the Lord is there as well. Is Jesus in the flesh, is the Son of God in the flesh with Abraham. And how cool that is. But also how much. Can you imagine how intimidating that must have been for Abraham too, right? I mean, you have the creator of the universe right in front of you. How cool that is. But then you also have the creator of the universe right in front of you. Oh my gosh. Like that must have been an insane moment in the life of Abraham. But you have this very interesting dialogue that goes back and forth between Abraham and the Lord concerning Sodom and Gomorrah, because that's where the men are going towards in verse 22. So the angels are not part of this conversation. They've already left. And I think in this moment, Abraham knows what is about to happen because the Lord basically tells him in verse 20, in verses 20 and 21 of chapter 18, hey, here's what's going to happen. And then he sees the men go towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's like, oh no, wait a second. He then brings up a question in verse 23. Then Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Which is a valid question. But I think there's obviously some personal background to that question because his nephew, Lot, is in Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, I'm trying to remember if I think he's in Sodom, but he's in Sodom and Gomorrah, that region, and so he will definitely be affected by this act of God's wrath. And so he's thinking, okay, I need to stand up for Lot. And it's funny to think that Abraham is the only one standing up for Lot, and the Lord doesn't know that Lot's living there. Of course, the Lord knows that Lot's living there. But I think what this is setting up is talking about the Lord's patience, but I also think it's setting up the Lord's compassion as well. So let's continue on with the point that Abraham is trying to make. So he makes that question in verse 23. Then in verse 24, suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And so we'll get to verse 25 in a second because there's a lot there. But in verse 24, even if there is 50 righteous in that city, Sodom and Gomorrah were not small cities, so it's still very much a fraction. So it's not like Abraham starting with a majority of the cities. No, he's starting with a very small part of the cities. I think when we think about this passage as he goes further and further down with the numbers, it's important to note that he's not starting with a really big number. He's starting actually with a really small, a quite small number. And I think that's important to remember here in this passage. But then you have verse 25, which is quite a statement. And in a way, you're thinking, who are you, Abraham, to tell the Lord what to do? But one, I think it shows the patience of the Lord that he doesn't just smote Abraham in that second, but I think it shows too the compassion of the Lord. And the reason why it is showing the compassion of the Lord, because Abraham knows the character of God. He knows that he is righteous. And so, therefore, why would he do this thing if he is the righteous judge of the earth and he does what is just? Um, and again, I think there is a personal, how should I put it? A personal connection with Sodom and Gomorrah through Lot for Abraham. So I think there is obviously this, hey, I have family there. This could be devastating for me if this happens. So I get that. And I think that is a lot what he's coming at. But he's also making a point too. But I think he is showing the problem of pain or the problem of evil. The problem of pain was written by C.S. Lewis back in the day, and the conundrum that brings up with this idea that righteous people that are following after Christ are sometimes looped in with the judgment that goes to non-believers. Is that just? And in a way, you would obviously say in our finite minds, no, that's not just. But in a way, it is because one, we don't deserve grace or mercy. We don't deserve that. So the fact that we even get that through Jesus alone is a blessing. Uh, but then you have it a little bit more where, but then that gives us as believers a chance to show how to respond to trials, and some trials that we didn't have any part to play with. Um, but that gives us a chance to show what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I think that's kind of what we're possibly seeing here. And hopefully that's what we see from Lot in chapter 19. Kind of, sort of, right? So we'll get to that next week. But let's see how the Lord responds. Verse 26 to the 50 righteous question from Abraham. Verse 26, and the Lord said, if I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. So he says, yeah, I'll do it. Does that mean he changes his mind? No, but it just means that God is compassionate. He is open to showing and pouring out his compassion, but he's also open and ready to pour out his judgment as well. So it's not that he's changing his mind. It's just, hey, I am God, and I am both compassionate and I'm both gracious. Uh, I'm both compassionate and gracious, but I'm also just and will bring out judgment upon my enemies. He's both of those things. So it's not changing a mind. But Abraham wants to keep going. So, verse 27, Abraham answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking, or 45. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5, or 45? And the Lord said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. And I think it's interesting how Abraham describes you and I, that we are dust and ashes. He's taking that from from the creation account of Adam in Genesis chapter 1. He's taking that from that point where Adam was created from dust and ashes. It's not just like he's just trying to be dramatic. No, that's how Adam was created. And so he's adoring the Lord at the same time as giving his plea or his prayer or his supplication. This is, in a sense, a prayer, this whole entire section. I think that's really, really cool to see. And so, okay, 45, I'll save it. Verse 29, again he spoke to him and said, suppose 40 are found there. He answered, the Lord answered, for the sake of 40, I will not do it. Then Abraham said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. God answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Abraham, and then verse 31, Abraham said, Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. The Lord answered, For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Verse 32, Then Abraham said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again but this once. Suppose 10 are found there. God answered, For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way, and when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So you have this back and forth. So 50 to 45, 45 to 40, 40 to 30, 30 to 20, 20 to 10. So what is Abraham getting at? First, I think he is wondering at this point, okay, the Lord is allowing me to go even smaller, and I think he's thinking to himself, "Look, I know the rumors about Sodom and Gomorrah. This is not a great place, so most likely there's probably not 50 there. There's probably not 45, not 40, not 30, not 20." But maybe there's 10. Maybe Lot, my nephew, and his family are big enough where it could be 10. Or hopefully, and I think he's obviously hoping this, hopefully Lot has evangelized about the Lord and about Yahweh. And so hopefully he will have 10 people there that are righteous. And the Lord then it's not that he says, okay, don't talk anymore. You're out of line. No, he goes his own way. From there, he leaves, and I think one, just the compassion of the Lord, but the patience that he has with Abraham in this conversation are really, really interesting. But that the fact that he got down to 10 is the reason why the account of Sodom and Gomorrah in chapter 19 is so just heartbreaking, because they couldn't even get they didn't even have 10 righteous people or 10 followers of Yahweh in this sense in the city. In the cities, sorry, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, there weren't even 10 there. And yet you have Abraham's nephew Lot living in those cities, and yet there's not even 10 followers of Yahweh. Because I think when we see righteous here, it's not just people that do good things. Because again, what is credited as righteousness to Abraham in chapter 15 and in chapter 17 too with the covenant, but what is credited to Abraham as righteousness? It's his faith. It's not what he does. It's the fact that he believes and trusts and follows Yahweh. He follows the Lord. And so it's not good people that are going to, that are being talked about here. It's followers of Yahweh. And the fact that there's not even 10 in these cities just shows you the depravity of Sodom and Gomorrah, but also, I think, the failure of Lot to be an evangelist. But we'll talk about that next week. So there's a couple things that we're going to break down with Sodom and Gomorrah next week. So both Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 19 and Sodom and Gomorrah. But thank you for spending time with me today as we wrap up chapter 18 in Genesis and continue on with the life of Abraham. I will see you next week, but I'll see you with Brown and Word tomorrow as well. Thanks.